In 1852, a Canadian inventor named Abraham Gessner discovered how to make kerosene from crude petroleum. In an age when candles and whale oil provided the only light after sundown, it was a dramatic discovery. Borrowing a page from alcohol distillers, Gessner used a primitive still-type system to distill and refine crude petroleum by heating it and separating its various elements. One of those elements was kerosene, which he found burned longer and cleaner than whale oil.
The superiority of kerosene was not only in the fact that it was a better illuminant, but it was ever so much cheaper. Whale oil was getting extremely costly. Town gas, for example, about 1860, you could light your house with town gas for about $10 a month. You could light your house with kerosene for $10 a year.
Created over millions of years by heat and pressure, petroleum is formed when living things die and decay and are converted to carbon-based minerals. The Bible records that Noah applied petroleum to the ark as a waterproofer. 1,000 years before Christ, the Chinese were burning it in lamps. And by 1100 AD, Christian crusaders found they could set petroleum ablaze to make Greek fire, which they hurled at their enemies in battle. Early Americans gathered the black goo from pools where it had oozed to the surface. By that time, the principal use of petroleum was as a medicine.
Petroleum was thought to be good for rheumatism or for arthritis or as an eye salve, various kinds of medicinal uses.
As long as petroleum was limited to use as an ointment or toothache remedy, there was little reason for men to spend much time searching for it. A few hundred gallons skimmed off pools each year more than met the demand. But the discovery of kerosene changed all that. Within a year of Gessner's discovery, his kerosene works was producing 5,000 gallons a day, and the need for more crude petroleum became critical. By 1859, 34 startup companies were producing $5 million worth of kerosene annually. The rush to find oil, and with it, huge fortunes, was on. Among the fortune hunters was a man named George Bissell. Bissell heard that salt miners in western Pennsylvania were complaining that their digs were being contaminated by oil. Hearing the news, he hired Edwin L. Drake to investigate and determine if the region held any potential for profit.
Edwin L. Drake, I think, is one of the most fantastic figures in American industrial history. He was a railroad conductor, a hotel clerk, an agricultural worker. Here is a man who had no technical background at all.
Drake sought drilling help from some of the people in the area who were experienced salt well drillers. He found William Smith, known to everyone as Uncle Billy, and hired him at the royal sum of $2.50 a day to come to Titusville and help him drill this well.
Smith went to work in a pump house that Drake had bought months before. He began by building a kind of battering ram out of white oak, which was used to pound metal pipe into the ground. The crude method worked for a while, but the human-powered contraption was useless when they hit bedrock 39 feet down. Drake hooked a steam engine to the ram and continued to pound into the earth. For months they drilled in vain. Then, on August 29, 1859, with the project on the verge of cancellation, Drake came to check on Smith. He found the blacksmith and his sons not drilling, but standing guard at the site. Around them were tubs and barrels filled with oil. Drake had made the most important oil strike in history.
He had persistence, he had imagination, he didn't know what couldn't be done. So finally, after he got down to about 69 feet, He realized that there was something down there that you could see that was not water, it was not brine, and when it was pumped up, it was petroleum. And so that was the crucial breakthrough.
News of the find quickly spread. Thousands were drawn to the area to make their fortune at a time when oil was selling for $20 a barrel. Almost overnight, a new town sprung up at an oil field near Drake's Well. Appropriately named Pithole City, by September of 1865, the town had 15,000 residents.
By the midsummer of 1865, by July, Pithole had its post office opened up, and by September of 1865, it had its own newspaper. Pithole had over 50 hotels, and the boarding houses, there's too numerous to count. It was impossible to keep track of all the people, but the post office would handle 10,000 letters a day, and a good many of those went to the dead letter office due to the fact that so many people were in and out of Pithole compared with your other smaller towns around the area. Pithole was where all the excitement was at that period of time of 1865.
Then, in January of 1866, the wells began to dry up. Output fell from 6,000 barrels a day to 3,000. Within the year, Pithole was producing only 2,000 barrels a day, and by the following fall, the flow had become a mere drip. Fortunes that had been made overnight vanished just as quickly. Within a year, the town was deserted. A parcel of land that had sold for $2 million in 1865 was auctioned off for $4.37. Edwin Drake, the man responsible for the most important oil strike in history, died penniless in 1880. Still, America was hooked on petroleum and the kerosene lamp. Great wealth awaited any man who could extract, process, and refine oil cheaply and quickly. Just such a man was working as a clerk at a Cleveland produce shipping firm. His name, John Davidson Rockefeller. John Davidson Rockefeller got into the oil business almost as an afterthought. At the age of 19, he and a partner had formed a produce shipping firm in Cleveland, Ohio, specializing in pork, salt, and wheat. During the early years of the Civil War, Rockefeller's produce firm prospered as wartime demands for these staples increased. Already a wealthy man by his late 20s, Rockefeller saw the future one cold fall day in 1863 when a new railroad reached Cleveland. Now, Cleveland was linked to the oil-rich regions of Pennsylvania. Dozens of petroleum refineries quickly sprang up along the city's rail lines. Rockefeller knew an opportunity when he saw one. In 1864, he bought his first oil refinery. It did not take him long to realize that the profit potential dwarfed that of the produce business. He became convinced that his future lay in oil, not commodity exchange.
Rockefeller's entry into oil refining follows, I think, a careful analysis of the commodity by Rockefeller himself. He saw the potential in this. Its lighting capability was much higher than candles or camphene or sperm oil, and he probably saw the potential, but he also heard what I would call the ruckus coming from the Pennsylvania border, because by the mid-1860s, Cleveland's newspapers were awash with stories of the fortunes being made and lost in the oil fields near Titusville and in western Pennsylvania.